4. In the hours after I was murdered, as my mother made phone calls and my father began going door to door in the neighborhood looking for me, Mr. Harvey had collapsed a hole in the back cornfield and carried away a sack filled with my body parts. He passed within 2 houses of where my father stood, talking to Mr. and Mrs. Tarkin. He kept to the property line in between 2 rows of mooring hedge, the old Dwyer's boxwood and the steed's goldenrod. His body brushed past the sturdy green leaves, leaving traces of me behind him, smells the Gilbert's dog would pick up and fall to find my elbow, smells the sleet and rain of the next 3 days would wash away before the police dogs could even be thought of. He carried me back to his house, where, while he went inside to wash up, I waited for him. After the house changed hands, the new owners tissed at the dark spot on the floor of their garage. As she brought prospective buyers through, the realtor said it was an oil stain, but it was me, seeping out of the bag Mr. Harvey carried and spilling onto the concrete. The beginning of my secret signals to the world. It would be some time before I realized what you've undoubtedly already assumed, that it wasn't the first girl he'd killed. He knew to remove my body from the fields. He knew to watch the weather and to kill during an arc of light to heavy precipitation, because that would rob the police of evidence. But he was not as fastidious as the police like to think. He forgot my elbow. He used the cloth sack for the bloody body, and if anyone had been watching, maybe they would have thought it was strange to see their neighbor walk a property line that was a tight fit, even for children who liked to pretend the warring hedges were a hideout. As he scoured his body in the hot water of his suburban bathroom, one with the identical layout to the one Lindsay Buckley and I shared, his movements were slow, not anxious. He felt a calm flood him. He kept the lights out of the bathroom and felt the warm water wash me away, and he felt thoughts of me then. My muffled scream in his ears, my delicious death moan. The glorious white flesh that had never seen the sun, like an infant's, then split so perfectly with the blade of his knife. He shivered under the heat, a prickling pleasure creating goosebumps up and down his arms and legs. He had put me in the waxy cloth sack and thrown in the shaving cream and razor from the mud ledge, his book of sonnets, and finally the bloody knife. They were tumbled together with my knees, fingers, and toes, but he made a note to extract them before my blood grew too sticky later that night. The sonnets and the knife, at least, he saved. At evensong, there were all sorts of dogs, and some of them, the ones I liked best, would lift their heads when they smelled an interesting scent in the air. If it was vivid enough, if they couldn't identify it immediately, or if, as the case may be, they knew exactly what it was, their brains going, steak tartare? They track it until they came to the object itself. In the face of the real article, the true story, they decided then what to do. That's how they operated. They didn't shut down their desire to know just because the smell was bad or the object was dangerous. They hunted. So did I. Mr. Harvey took the waxy orange sack of my remains to a sinkhole 8 miles from our neighborhood, an area that until recently had been desolate save for the railroad tracks and a nearby motorcycle repair shop. In his car, he played a radio station that looped Christmas carols during the month of December. He whistles inside his huge station wagon and congratulated himself. Felt full up. Apple pie, cheeseburger, ice cream, coffee. Full. Better and better he was getting now, never using an old pattern that would bore him, but making each kill a surprise to himself, a gift to himself. The air inside the station wagon was cold and fragile. I could see the moist air when he exhales, and this made me want to palpate my own stony lungs. He drove the reed-thin road that cut between two new industrial lots, the wagon fish-tailed coming up out of a particularly deep potload, and the safe that held the sack that held my body smashed against the inside hub of the wagon's back wheel, cracking the plastic. "Damn," Mr. Harvey said, but he picked up his whistling again without pause. I had a memory of going down this road with my father at the wheel, and Buckley sitting nestled against me, one seatbelt serving the two of us, in an illegal joyride away from the house. My father had asked if any of us kids wanted to watch a refrigerator disappear. "The earth will swallow it," he said. He put on his hat and the dark cordovan gloves I coveted. I knew gloves meant you were an adult, and mittens meant you weren't. For Christmas 1973, my mother had brought me a pair of gloves. Lindsay ended up with them, but she knew they were mine. She left them at the edge of the cornfield one day on her way home from school. She was always doing that, bringing me things. "The earth has a mouth?" Buckley asked. "A big, round mouth, but with no lips," my father said. "Jack," my mother said, laughing. "Stop it. Do you know I caught him outside growling at the snapdragons?" "I'll go," I said. My father had told me that there was an abandoned underground mine, and it had collapsed to create a sinkhole. I didn't care. I liked to see the earth swallow something as much as the next kid. So when I watched Mr. Harvey take me out to the sinkhole, I couldn't help but think how smart he was. How he put the bag in a metal safe, placing me in the middle of all that weight. It was late when he got there, and he left the safe in his wagoneer while he approached the house of the Flanagans, who lived on the property where the sinkhole was. The Flanagans made their living by charging people to dump their appliances. Mr. Harvey knocked on the door of the small white house. A woman came to answer it. The scent of rosemary and lamb filled my heaven and hit Mr. Harvey's nose as it trailed out from the back of the house. He could see a man in the kitchen. "Good evening, sir," Mrs. Flanagan said. "Got an item?" "Back of my wagon," Mr. Harvey said. He was ready with a $20 bill. "What you got in there? A dead body?" she joked. It was the last thing on her mind. She lived in a warm, if small house. She had a husband who was always home to fix things and to be sweetened on her because he had never had to work. And she had a son who was still young enough to think his mother was the only thing in the world. Mr. Harvey smiled, and as I watched his smile break across his face, I would not look away. "Old safe of my father's. Finally got it out here," he said. "Been meaning to do it for years. No one remembers the combination." "Anything in it?" she asked. "Still there." "Back her up then. You need any help?" "That would be lovely," he said.